Hello, my friends and fellow travelers. My name is Pierce. This is my channel, Tales from the Road. Thanks so much for stopping by. So on this channel, I've done lots of things. I've done lots of vlogs. I've recently done a lot of travel guides. And the one question I get more than any other question is, Pierce, what is the Schengen Zone? How long can I stay in Europe? And no matter how many times I put this in my videos, I still have people asking me this simple question. So in today's video, I'm going to make it really easy for you guys. I'm going to break down what is the European Union, what is the Schengen Zone, which countries are in which, and what does it all mean for Americans and also for anybody traveling. It really affects the visa status, and it's important to know, it's important to not overstay. I don't want anyone getting kicked out of Europe. So Mr. Pierce, that's me, I'm here to help. So if that sounds good, come along for a ride through European political border information. Let's do it. So first off, we're going to start with what the Schengen area or the Schengen Zone is. And I'm going to read it right off their front page. It says, the Schengen area is an area encompassing 29 European countries that have officially abolished border controls at their mutual borders. So what that means is when you travel in Europe, you land in a country. You are stamped into that country, but if that country is part of the Schengen Zone, you have then been stamped into the Schengen Zone. So let's compare the Schengen Zone to the federal United States. And that's really what we're talking about here. You know that if you have 180 days on a visa and you fly into New York City, that means if you travel to a different state like Pennsylvania or California or Florida or Wyoming, no matter what, that 180-day clock is ticking. This is what the Schengen Zone is in Europe for the 29 nations that have opened their borders to the greater Schengen Zone. It makes life easier for Europeans because they get to travel as domestic travelers. They get to work in those countries as well. You can think of it sort of a defederalized border zone, just like what we have in the United States. That being said, people get confused with what the EU is in comparison to the Schengen Zone. And people think that because there's some differentiation, like maybe the rules don't apply to me. And let me tell you, my friends, the rules do apply to you. So here's the information you need. So we've already established that the Schengen Zone is a free trade and free people movement zone amongst European nations. Now, the European Union is a political and economic affiliation. Number one, the European Union does fiscal management and a central bank controlled by Brussels, and most of those countries use the euro. That's part of the European Union. But secondarily, the European Union is a political bloc, an agreement between many European states, which, for example, takes funding from each of the states, which goes to Brussels, which is the European Union capital, and then it gets dispersed for projects that are sponsored by the European Union. That's a big part of it. It's also a political bloc when they're making sort of policy, like, for example, refugee policy, asylum seeker policy, interstate trade policy, if you want to put it that way. The EU does all of that stuff. The Schengen Zone and the EU, while there is a lot of overlap, they are not the same thing, my friends. They are not the same thing. So let me give you a good explanation with one of our source countries. So in these two maps, you're going to see some differences. Switzerland is an awesome example. Switzerland is the neutral country of Europe. They have no affiliations. They've never had any affiliations with any other European countries. It doesn't really matter what time period we're looking at. Switzerland is in the Schengen Zone. So that means if you fly to Germany or you fly to Italy and you want to take a train or a plane to Switzerland, you can. And the cool part about that is you probably won't even have to show your passport because it's in the Schengen Zone. It's in the free movement zone of Europe. That being said, Switzerland doesn't have any political affiliation with the EU. They're not a member. They've never been a member. They don't have to follow any rules or regulations when it comes to the EU. Of course, they will play ball with them and be nice with them because they are surrounded by EU states. But politically, nothing to do with the EU. Schengen Zone-wise, they are in the same status as many bordering EU countries, as I said, Germany to the north, Italy to the south, France to the west. It just makes it easier so you can transport goods, peoples, and services without having to have a border to physically cross, present your passport, and stamp in and out. That was the idea. So here's an interesting case. The UK used to be in the European Union. They've been in it for a long time, and then as we all recall, Brexit happened and they bounced. The UK was never in the Schengen zone. So there are countries that are in the European Union that are not in the Schengen zone. The Schengen zone is only open to member states who meet a certain fix of criteria that is all agreed upon. So for example, a country like Cyprus, which is an island south of Turkey, is in the European Union, but they are not in the Schengen zone. And the reason they're not in the Schengen zone is because the northern part of Cyprus is basically occupied by Turkey. It's an illegal occupation as stated by the European Union and by the current government of Cyprus. And the Cypriot government cannot regulate who flies into the northern part of Cyprus. So ergo, they're not allowed to be in the Schengen zone because it's an unregulated country in some ways. Other countries which are completely regulated, like Portugal or like Spain, they're in the European Union. They've been in for a long period of time. They're also in the Schengen zone. They've been in it for a long period of time. They're also in the European Economic Area, which is the euro. All of those things, they're in all of them. So why is this important? The important thing is that when you're doing a European trip for a longer period of time, or you're like me and you want to work in Europe as a digital nomad or something, you need to be aware of your clock. Because if you're not aware of your clock, you are at risk of getting banned from Europe for 5 years, of incurring large fines and penalties, and I don't want that for you. That's not a thing I want for you. So the point is that when you land in Madrid and you're gung-ho about living in Spain for X amount of time, that's awesome. But if you spend your 90 days in Madrid and you think, okay, now I'm just going to go to the Netherlands because that's a different country and I can stay there and I have a new 90 days, I'm sorry, my friends, you are misinformed. You are at risk for the fines. You're at risk for all the problems that come with overstaying a visa, just like any other country. You're basically an illegal immigrant at that point, and I don't want that for you. There are many ways to stay in European countries if you want. There are many countries with digital nomad visas that are happening, such as Hungary, Croatia has one, Spain has a non-lucrative visa, Portugal has a pretty good digital nomad visa. Most countries in Europe are aware that this is, mobile work is happening, and they want you to come. That's the point. They want you to come, but they want you to do it the right way. So please, please, please learn the Schengen Zone map, learn the EU map, and don't get them confused. That being said, many non-EU countries in Europe, specifically the Balkan Peninsula and Eastern Europe, because things are changing, are petitioning to join the Schengen Zone and the EU at the same time. So Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia were EU members, but are always in the discussion of being Schengen Zone members. The reason being is that the Schengen Zone area has to sort of, play ball with the countries that are not in the EU, and those countries want to make sure that the countries that are being added are following the rules and regulations of the Schengen Zone, because that is the greater border of the Schengen Zone now. So Croatia was admitted. Bulgaria and Romania, however, for various reasons, were blocked and petitioned by other countries. And right now, if you fly into Bulgaria and Romania, you are flying into the Schengen Zone, but land borders, if you're driving into Romania and Bulgaria, you are not driving into the Schengen Zone. They were let in halfway because I think flights people trust as far as the Schengen Zone goes, but the border patrols of Romania and Bulgaria are still on the sketchy side, as seen by the greater Schengen area, and they would still like those regulated by the Romanian and Bulgarian states, and then of course regulated on the bordering countries that border them, like Hungary, to make sure that everything is good to go. Now, you want to stay in Europe, but you want to play the game. The game that I've been playing is the 90 in, 90 out, because you get a 180-day period, and within that 180-day period, you get 90 days in the Schengen Zone, 90 days out. So what you can do, and that doesn't include the EU. That's not an EU thing. This is a Schengen Zone thing. That's the important thing. So you can spend 90 days in Madrid, and then you have to be out of the Schengen Zone. So it could be you go live in London. That could be you go live in Ireland, because Ireland is in the EU, but it's not in the Schengen Zone. That could be you live in North Africa and you just bail out of the whole European area. You live in Morocco, you live in Tunisia, you live in Egypt. If you're worried about time zone things, you can live in Turkey, you can live in Israel, you can live in Lebanon if that works for you. I mean, it depends on the time zone, right? I'm just talking about what I've done. And then you can live in some countries in the Balkans that are either in the EU or in the EU, not in the Schengen Zone, or just not in the EU, not in the Schengen Zone. Serbia would be the best example. Serbia is not in the EU. Serbia is not in the Schengen Zone. The chance that they're going to get in the EU or the Schengen zone is also very low because Serbia's politics is very different than the EU politics. So I also love Albania. Albania is not in the EU. Albania is not in the Schengen zone. So when you go there, you're very close. You can go to Greece very quickly. You can go to Italy very quickly. But please don't go if you have more than 90 days within 180 days, because just because you go to Albania doesn't mean you've reset the clock. You still have to wait your full 90 days. So your options: Turkey, Albania, by land Romania, by land Bulgaria, Macedonia, Montenegro. These are all countries in the Balkans that you can do. Moldova, even. Ukraine used to be a good option, obviously not a good option now. Russia used to be a reasonable option, not an option now. That being said, please don't go to Estonia and think that, oh, I'm very far away, it's a different country, it'll be fine. It's not fine. You're breaking the rules. That being said, if you do break the rules, this is some inside traveler trick information. If you do break the rules, there are some, not hacks, I don't want to say hacks, because you're always at risk. You are always at risk of getting a fine, 100%. Don't overstay your visa. This is not me saying overstay your visa, but if you do, don't leave through countries that take their borders very seriously. So that being said, and this is a trick of the trade, is from everybody I've met that's overstayed their visas in Europe, which I don't understand it because I work so hard to stay normally in Europe with a visa, with the process. I'm a process guy. But if you really don't care and you really want to risk it, just don't leave through Germany, don't leave through the Netherlands, don't leave through Copenhagen, don't leave through Stockholm. Pick a country where it's a little bit more loosey-goosey, maybe from an airport that's also a little bit more loosey-goosey. Spain could be a good choice. Maybe leave from the south of Spain. Maybe take a boat to Morocco. Because the question is the enforcement comes when they check to see if you've overstayed. So if no one checks, or if they're not checking correctly, or they don't care because you're American or something, then whatever, you're out. Not a problem. You're not going to get a fine. If you leave from Germany, and this is what I've heard, 100% of people will get fined. Even if you overstay one day in Germany, you are liable for some sort of fine. So, and the worst part is you could actually be banned from Europe, which would be so sad, in my opinion. And it wouldn't be worth overstaying. So don't overstay is number one. Legally, I would say don't overstay. But if you do, pick your exit point strategically, because if you fly out from a place where you're I'll just leave from Brussels, you're going to get fined and banned for sure. Oh, I'm going to leave from Amsterdam. You're going to get fined and banned. If you leave on a boat to Morocco, I don't know. The thing is, you could get fined and banned, but maybe they don't care as much. So that's pretty much all I would say. I'm not sure that advice is going to get me in trouble. It's not really even advice. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying that's what I would do if it was me. So that was a little overview of the European Union, the Schengen Zone, and what it means for foreigners. Please, if you come to Europe, know your rules, know the visa rules, know the regulations. This will make your life a lot easier. And then you can just worry about enjoying your time wherever you're going rather than worrying about rules and regulations. Also, if you do make a mistake, you can go to the authorities and report that you've made a mistake, and hopefully because you've been nice and you've reported yourself and you've been ignorant in some sort of sense, maybe they'll let you off with a little slap on the wrist as opposed to a fine and a ban. So I'm all for following the rules, and I think you should be too when you travel, because when we travel to countries, we are, of course, guests of those countries. I hope that was helpful. If you have any more questions about the Schengen Zone or the EU or any of those things and where that leaves you as far as a digital nomad or a traveler, please feel free to drop a comment below. You can write me on my Instagram. I'm cooking food from all across the world. I'd love you guys to join me. It's Tastes from the Road on Instagram. Let's get tasty. And I'm going to make more of these travel guides, yes, but also more of these informative digital nomad type guides, because I've been doing it for a long time. And I've picked up a lot of information along the way, which I'd like to share with you guys online. So that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Travel safe, travel legally, and I'll see you in the next video, my friends.